Hello everyone and welcome to my Y&R Trends channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The bustling streets of Genoa City often hide dark secrets beneath their glamorous surface. And this time the shocking twist that no one saw coming is the sudden brutal death of Audra Charles. For months, Audra has been weaving herself into the lives of powerful men and influential families, playing dangerous games with hearts and empires alike. But as fans know all too well, such games can only last so long before consequences come knocking. When news breaks that Audra has been found murdered under mysterious circumstances, the entire town spirals into chaos, grief, suspicion, and intrigue. Who could have wanted her gone badly enough to resort to such an unthinkable act? The list of potential suspects is long, and the motives even longer, as her tangled web of deceit and ambition finally begins to unravel in the most chilling way imaginable. The night of her murder will be talked about for years to come. Genoa City had been buzzing with excitement that evening due to a high-profile business gala, hosted by Chancellor Winters. Audra, always one to be seen in the most glamorous settings, made a dramatic entrance. Dressed in an elegant deep red gown, she looked every bit the femme fatale she had built her reputation on being. She mingled with the city's most influential figures, her sharp tongue and sly smile drawing admiration from some and suspicion from others. But behind the perfectly crafted image she projected, enemies lurked in the shadows, watching her every move, calculating their own plans. Some whispered she had been pushing her luck too far lately, crossing too many people who had both the power and motive to strike back. Hours later, long after the gala had ended and the city had fallen into an uneasy silence, the shocking discovery was made. Audra's lifeless body was found in a secluded part of the Genoa City Athletic Club's parking garage, her elegant gown torn and stained, her expression frozen in a mix of terror and disbelief. The police were immediately called, and soon the area was swarming with flashing lights, forensic teams, and shocked onlookers. The glamorous event that began with champagne and laughter had ended in tragedy, setting the stage for one of the most gripping murder mysteries the town has ever seen. Word spread like wildfire. Within hours, whispers and speculations reached every corner of Genoa City, from Newman Enterprises offices to the Abbott Mansion. Everyone had an opinion and almost everyone had a theory. The most chilling part was that Audra's death didn't seem to be a random act of violence. This wasn't a mugging gone wrong or a case of mistaken identity. No, this was personal. Whoever had killed Audra had known her, had likely hated her, and had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The murder bore the marks of vengeance rather than chance, leaving the police with the daunting task of combing through her long list of rivals, lovers, and betrayers. Detective Chance Chancellor, still recovering from his own recent ordeals, quickly took charge of the investigation. The grim determination on his face made it clear he wouldn't let this case go cold. Audra may have been controversial, even manipulative, but she had still been a living, breathing part of Genoa City. Now she was gone and someone had to answer for it. Chance began by reconstructing her final hours, speaking to witnesses from the gala, reviewing security footage, and trying to piece together the chain of events that led her to that dark parking garage. Who had lured her there? Who had she argued with? Who had the most to gain from her death? Almost immediately, the list of suspects began to grow. One of the first names whispered was Kyle Abbott. Their recent entanglement had been filled with tension, passion, and betrayal. Kyle had trusted her once, only to discover that Audra was often playing her own game. Had his bitterness over her manipulations driven him over the edge? Or perhaps Tucker McCall, Audra's frequent ally turned enemy, who had his own turbulent history with her. Then there was Nate Hastings, who had grown wary of Audra's influence, and Victoria Newman, who had never been blind to Audra's ambition and sly moves within the business world. Even Nick and Adam Newman found themselves under scrutiny, given their families' constant clashes with outsiders who dared to interfere in their empire. Each name added another layer of complexity to the mystery, leaving fans to wonder who would ultimately be exposed as the culprit. What made Audra's death even more gripping was the fact that she had been so deeply entangled in multiple storylines. She had been both lover and liar, ally and enemy, friend and betrayer. She thrived on creating chaos and bending others to her will, but perhaps she underestimated just how far those around her were willing to go to break free of her grip. Every corner of Genoa City seemed touched by her influence, which meant that almost everyone had a reason to celebrate her downfall, or to fear the investigation would uncover secrets they had hoped to keep buried. The morning after Audra's body was discovered, Genoa City woke to a storm of rumors, media reports, and hushed conversations. The shock still lingered in the air, and for many, it was difficult to reconcile the image of Audra as a vibrant, ambitious woman with the horrifying reality that she was now the centerpiece of a murder investigation. Newspapers and gossip blogs splashed her name across their headlines, hinting at scandal, betrayal, and retribution. For those who had crossed paths with her, it was impossible to ignore the gnawing question. Would they become suspects in a case that promised to expose secrets buried deep within the city's most powerful families? Detective Chance Chancellor set up his temporary base of operations inside the Genoa City Police Department, poring over every available lead. He had always been methodical, but this case required an almost surgical precision. Audra's connections ran like tangled roots through the business, social, and romantic lives of countless people. In the dimly lit room, Chance stared at a whiteboard that bore her name in large black letters at the center, with dozens of smaller names surrounding it like satellites. Each name represented a possible suspect. Each line between them told a story of broken trust, betrayal, or manipulation. Kyle Abbott's name was among the first circled. His relationship with Audra had been a fiery mix of passion and deceit. While Kyle initially thought he had found someone who understood him, he quickly realized she was using him as a stepping stone in her ambitious climb. Their breakup had been anything but clean, and whispers from the gala suggested that Kyle and Audra had shared heated words just hours before her death. He had stormed away looking furious, which gave him both motive and opportunity. But was Kyle truly capable of murder? Or was his anger simply another red herring in a town where everyone had a reason to hate Audra? Another glaring name on the board was Tucker McCall. Tucker and Audra's partnership had been one of convenience, ambition, and double-crossing. While they once operated as allies, their alliance had collapsed into mistrust and betrayal. Tucker was known for his ruthless streak, and though he usually kept his hands clean by pulling strings from the shadows, Chance couldn't ignore the possibility that this time, he may have gotten personally involved. After all, Tucker had been seen leaving the gala early, his expression stormy, his phone calls unanswered. Did he lure Audra into that parking garage? Or was he simply another pawn in someone else's more sinister plan? Then there was Nate Hastings. Audra had often tested his patience, crossing professional boundaries and playing dangerous games with his loyalties. Nate had fought hard to maintain his place within Newman Enterprises, and Audra had often been the thorn in his side, pushing too far, too fast. Rumors had circulated for weeks that Nate had been on the verge of exposing Audra's schemes to Victoria Newman. But when asked, Nate seemed strangely subdued, insisting that he had nothing but pity for Audra. His calm demeanor, however, only made Chance more suspicious. Was he hiding guilt? Or was his quiet response the reaction of someone who truly had nothing left to say? Of course, Victoria herself could not be ruled out. Ambitious, calculating, and fiercely protective of her position within Newman Enterprises, Victoria had every reason to view Audra as a threat. The two women had clashed on more than one occasion, and Victoria's tolerance for Audra's games had grown thinner by the day. On the night of the gala, Victoria had been seen keeping her distance, her eyes sharp and watchful as Audra worked the room. Had she orchestrated something from behind the scenes? Was she the mastermind pulling strings, ensuring Audra's final curtain call was delivered by someone else's hand? The Newman brothers also lingered on the suspect list. Adam Newman, with his history of darkness and impulsive acts, had never been far from suspicion in any scandal that rocked the city. Though he denied having any recent dealings with Audra, it was well known that their paths had crossed before. Audra had once hinted at information she could use against him, and Adam wasn't the type to allow himself to be blackmailed. Nick Newman, on the other hand, was less obvious but not immune. Protective of his family, Nick had always despised outsiders who tried to worm their way into Newman business. If he believed Audra posed a danger to Victoria or the company, could he have taken drastic measures to eliminate the problem permanently? As Chance sorted through the evidence, the picture only grew more complicated. Security footage from the gala showed Audra leaving alone, though her phone records suggested she had received a mysterious call shortly before heading to the parking garage. Whoever had lured her there had known her weaknesses, had known exactly how to get her away from the crowd. The phone number was blocked, leaving the police scrambling to trace its origins. Even more disturbing was the fact that no murder weapon had yet been recovered. The forensics team suggested blunt force trauma as the cause of death, but without the weapon, Chance knew it would be difficult to pin the crime on anyone. Meanwhile, in homes and offices across Genoa City, conversations buzzed with fear and speculation. At Society, hushed tones carried rumors of Kyle's involvement. At the Newman Ranch, Victor Newman raised an eyebrow at the chaos, quietly wondering if this tragedy could be turned into a business advantage. Over at the Abbott estate, Jack worried about his son's name being dragged through the mud, while Ashley speculated on Tucker's guilt. In every corner of the city, alliances were shifting, secrets were being whispered, and the mystery of Audra's murder tightened its grip. The question that haunted everyone wasn't just who killed Audra, but who would be exposed next. Because in Genoa City, secrets never stay buried for long, and murder has a way of pulling skeletons out of even the most carefully guarded closets. As Chance Chancellor intensified the investigation, he knew the only way to break through the fog of lies was to confront each potential suspect head-on. Genoa City's social circles were used to gossip, affairs, and corporate espionage, but murder was a different beast. This wasn't a scandal that could be swept under a rug or spun into a business strategy. Someone had blood on their hands, and Chance intended to uncover who it was, no matter how deep the rot ran. Kyle Abbott was the first person brought in for questioning. Sitting across from Chance, Kyle's usually composed demeanor was visibly cracked. His agitation was clear. His leg bounced restlessly beneath the table, and his jaw clenched every time Audra's name was mentioned. Chance pressed him about their last encounter, the heated argument at the gala. Kyle admitted that tempers had flared but insisted he left Audra alive and well. He claimed he had gone home afterward, but his alibi was shaky at best. No one could verify his whereabouts until the early hours of the morning. Jack, his father, had immediately offered support, but even Jack couldn't deny that Kyle had been spiraling emotionally in recent weeks. Was Kyle's defensiveness a sign of guilt, or simply the behavior of a man terrified of being framed? Next on the list was Tucker McCall. Unlike Kyle, Tucker exuded a calm, calculated confidence as he sat across from the detective. He leaned back in his chair, his hands folded neatly, his voice steady. To Tucker, Audra's murder was unfortunate, but he framed it as though her demise was almost inevitable, given the enemies she had accumulated. His lack of emotion was unsettling. When Chance questioned his whereabouts, Tucker claimed he left the gala to take a private call at his suite and had fallen asleep shortly after. But hotel staff couldn't confirm seeing him return when he said he did, leaving a troubling gap in his timeline. Tucker was a master manipulator, someone who could spin lies with ease, and that made him a dangerous suspect. Nate Hastings was far more defensive when questioned. Unlike Tucker, his nerves showed in the way he avoided direct eye contact, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He denied any involvement, insisting he had been with Elena that night. However, Elena's testimony revealed she hadn't seen Nate until much later in the evening. When pressed, Nate claimed he had taken a walk after the gala to clear his head. Chance noted the inconsistency, aware that Nate's strained relationship with Audra had reached breaking point in the weeks leading up to her death. She had been threatening to expose him for information he had once leaked, and that gave him a clear motive to silence her permanently. Victoria Newman was less cooperative than the others. Summoned to the station, she exuded her signature cool confidence, brushing off Chance's questions as though she were above suspicion. She admitted she disliked Audra and distrusted her intentions within Newman Enterprises, but she flatly denied any involvement in her death. Her alibi was stronger than the others. Security footage placed her leaving the gala with Nikki Newman. Still, Victoria's influence, her ability to manipulate situations behind the scenes, made her dangerous. Chance knew better than to take her word at face value. If Victoria wanted Audra gone, she could have arranged it without ever getting her hands dirty. The Newman brothers, Adam and Nick, were questioned next. Adam, true to form, was sardonic and irritated, as though the very idea of being dragged into another scandal bored him. He denied any connection to Audra in recent months, though Chance found it suspicious how quickly he tried to distance himself. Adam's history was littered with questionable decisions, and while he claimed he'd been home alone that night, no one could vouch for him. Nick, on the other hand, was cooperative but curt. His disdain for Audra was no secret. He had never trusted her involvement with Victoria or Newman Enterprises. His alibi was slightly stronger than Adam's, as he had been spotted at Crimson Lights shortly after leaving the gala, but there was still a window of time unaccounted for before Audra's death. Outside the official questioning, whispers continued to spread through Genoa City. At Society, Phyllis Summers speculated that Audra had been blackmailing someone powerful, and that person had decided to end the game once and for all. At Chancellor Winters, Devon and Lily argued about whether Tucker's involvement was more obvious than everyone wanted to admit. Meanwhile, Diane Jenkins privately worried about how much more stress Kyle could endure, while Ashley Abbott seemed almost certain that Tucker's hands weren't clean. Everyone had an opinion, but none of them had the truth. As the days passed, Chance began piecing together the evidence like a puzzle. The blocked call on Audra's phone became the centerpiece of the investigation. Forensic techs managed to trace it back to a burner phone purchased in Genoa City only days before the murder. Security cameras showed a figure buying it, but the grainy footage offered no clear identification. Whoever it was had taken steps to remain anonymous, suggesting the crime had been premeditated. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment killing born of rage. It was planned, calculated, and deliberate. Then came the discovery of a crucial piece of evidence. A strand of hair found near Audra's body that didn't match hers. The lab confirmed it belonged to someone close to the circle of suspects, though Chance kept the results under wraps until he could verify them. The walls were closing in, and it was only a matter of time before one of Genoa City's residents cracked under the pressure. The murder had not only robbed the town of one of its most controversial figures, but it had also ripped open a Pandora's box of secrets. Relationships were strained, alliances questioned, and trust eroded. In Genoa City, guilt had a way of seeping out, no matter how carefully someone tried to bury it. And with each passing day, the sense of paranoia grew. Who among them was hiding the truth? And who would be the next to fall when that truth finally came to light? The gentle hum of the air conditioning was the only sound that dared to break the silence of the penthouse, a low mechanical whisper against the profound stillness that had settled over the lavish space. It was a stillness that felt wrong, an intrusion upon the usual ambient noises of a life being lived, the clink of a glass, the rustle of silk, the distant echo of a laugh. This new quiet was absolute and heavy, a thick blanket smothering the very air. Audra Charles, a woman whose presence was often defined by its formidable energy, its sharp wit, and an ambition that could be felt like a charge in the room, was now the source of this unnerving peace. She lay perfectly still on the imported Italian rug, her blonde hair fanned out around her head like a tragic halo, a stark contrast to the deep burgundy stain that was slowly spreading across the pristine, cream-colored fabric beneath her. The vibrant, almost electric blue of the dress she had chosen for the evening, a power color she'd called it, for a power meeting, was now marred, its brilliance overshadowed by the violent evidence of her final moments. Her eyes, once a piercing, calculating blue that could size up a boardroom or a man with equal precision, were now open and vacant, fixed upon the crystal chandelier that hung from the vaulted ceiling, its thousand facets reflecting a scene they were never meant to witness. The world of Genoa City, a world she had fought so ruthlessly to conquer, had finally exacted its price, and the bill had been paid in full, in blood, in this temple of her own ambition. The discovery, when it came, was not a dramatic, screaming affair, but a slow, dawning horror. Kyle Abbott, needing to finalize a last-minute detail for a merger they had been tirelessly working on at Jabot, had let himself in with the key Audra had given him for such emergencies. He called out her name, his voice echoing in the vast, open-plan living area, expecting a curt reply or perhaps the click of her heels on the marble floor. When no answer came, a flicker of irritation passed through him. Audra was many things, but unreliable in business was not one of them. He moved further into the penthouse, the plush carpet muffling his steps, until he turned the corner and saw her. For a long suspended moment, his brain refused to process the information. It was a tableau so incongruous, so violently out of place, that it seemed like a grotesque piece of modern art. Then the scent of copper and perfume, a cloying, expensive fragrance mixed with the metallic tang of blood, hit him and his stomach lurched. He stumbled backward, his hand flying to his mouth, a strangled gasp the only sound he could manage. His phone, clutched in his other hand, felt suddenly alien and heavy. With trembling fingers, his vision blurring at the edges, he dialed 911. His voice a hoarse, unrecognizable croak as he reported the unimaginable to a calm, disembodied voice on the other end of the line. He was still standing there, frozen in a state of shock, when the first wail of sirens pierced the Genoa city night, a mournful chorus announcing a seismic shift in the lives of everyone who knew her. The initial police investigation, led by the perpetually weary but razor-sharp Detective Chief Inspector Frank Evans, was a meticulous and invasive process. The penthouse, once a symbol of Audra's hard-won success, was now a crime scene, its opulence desecrated by the yellow tape, the dusting powder for fingerprints, and the grim methodical work of the forensic team. There was no sign of forced entry, a detail DCI Evans noted with particular interest. The locks were sophisticated, the security system top of the line and, crucially, had not been triggered. This pointed to one of two possibilities. Either Audra had known her attacker and let them in willingly, or the person was so familiar with her home and habits that they knew how to bypass her defenses. The murder weapon was not immediately found, though the preliminary coroner's report suggested a heavy, blunt object, something solid and unforgiving, likely wielded with a ferocious, singular intent. There were no defensive wounds on Audra's hands or arms, suggesting the attack had been sudden, brutally efficient, and from a position of surprise. Perhaps a blow from behind as she turned away, trusting the person in her space. The scene was, in the cold, clinical language of law enforcement, clean. Too clean. There were no overturned chairs, no signs of a struggle, no broken valuables. It was as if the violence had been a single, explosive event contained within a bubble of normalcy, making the violation all the more profound. The only thing out of place, aside from the body itself, was a single long-stemmed red rose, found lying on the floor a few feet from Audra, its petals a deep velvety crimson that seemed to mock the darker stain nearby. It was a theatrical touch, a signature that felt personal, almost intimate in its symbolism. As the news began to ripple through the tight-knit, gossip-fueled ecosystem of Genoa City, shockwaves of disbelief, fear, and in some quarters a grim sense of satisfaction began to spread. In a town where secrets were currency and alliances shifted with the wind, a murder of this magnitude was not just a tragedy, it was a catalyst. And with a catalyst comes a reaction, and in this case, the reaction was a rapidly forming cloud of suspicion that began to settle over a host of individuals, each with their own complicated, and often fraught, history with the victim. Audra Charles had not climbed the corporate and social ladder by being kind. She had been a strategist, a manipulator, a woman who used information and intimacy as weapons, leaving a trail of damaged relationships and embittered rivals in her wake. To find her killer, one had to look at the wreckage of her past, and in Genoa City that wreckage was extensive. The list of people who had motive, opportunity, and the capacity for such cold-blooded violence was, unfortunately, not a short one. The question was not who wanted Audra dead, but who, among the many, had finally been pushed past the point of mere desire and into the realm of brutal action. Kyle Abbott stood by the panoramic window of the penthouse, now cordoned off, watching the city lights twinkle below, a serene view that starkly contrasted the turmoil inside him. He was one of the last people to see her alive, having met with her earlier that evening to go over the final points of the Jabot merger. Their relationship was a complex tapestry woven with threads of professional respect, fierce competition, and a tangled romantic history that neither of them had ever fully been able to sever. The meeting had been tense, he admitted to Detective Evans. Audra had been her usual demanding, brilliant, and infuriatingly opaque self. She had hinted at having leverage, not just in the business deal, but about something personal, something from his past that could reconfigure the landscape, as she'd so cryptically put it. Kyle had left frustrated but murderously so? He insisted not. Yet, his fingerprints were all over the penthouse, on the whiskey glass he'd used, on the door handle, on the table where they'd spread their documents. He had a key. He had no verifiable alibi for the entire window of time established by the medical examiner. And perhaps most damningly, their recent past was a minefield of betrayal and resentment. He had used her to get ahead at Jabot, and she had certainly used him in return. Theirs was a dance of mutual exploitation, but had the music finally stopped with a fatal misstep? Was Kyle's boyish charm and corporate polish merely a facade for a colder, more desperate man, pushed to the edge by Audra's relentless machinations and her threat to expose a secret he couldn't afford to have revealed?